Hi, I'm Steve Sable. History books tell us that pro football began on September 17th, 1920, when the Canton Bulldogs, the Dayton Triangles, the Decatur Staleys, and 7 other teams formed the National Football League. But the fascinating chapter that historians have often overlooked covers the game's dark ages, before the NFL, when pro football had no organization, no money, and no home. It was a gypsy game then, played by vagabond athletes who tramped from small town to small town. These men were cut from a different cloth, and their era has become known as pro football's rag days.
I was a high school youngster of 16 at the time, but I still have vivid recollections of what occurred in Canton after the team returned from the Massillon game. One of my neighbors had lost a heavy bet on the disputed contest, and on that evening, he took me with him to the Cortland Hotel bar, where most of the Bulldogs had congregated to post-mortem the game. He lost no time in making his feelings known. "If you want to know what I think," he said, "I think that game was crooked." The fight that started in that bar room was as spontaneous as the lighting of a fuse on a powder keg. Tables were overturned and the surging crowd crashed through the plate glass window and continued the battle on Court Street until the coppers arrived with their nightsticks to quell the rioters and haul some of them away to the pokey. At that time, I was already an avid football fan, but after that brawl at the Cortland, I was convinced that this was the sport for me. Jack Cusack, manager, Canton Bulldogs.
In the late 1800s, a few New England schools began playing a new sport. It was the perfect game for a generation trying to free itself from the sedate Victorianism of its elders. They called it football, and it developed a loyal following in the Ivy League and offered up its own father figure, Walter Camp of Yale. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution was reshaping America, and Camp's new game boarded a westbound train, stopping at every mining village and steel town on the way. It was here, in the mills of western Pennsylvania, that the pro game would be born. The workers needed a release from their claustrophobic daily routine, and they found it on the football field. Local rivalries flared up and fueled independent amateur football. But as the rivalries intensified, the incentive to pay the best players increased, and whisperings of professionalism in Pennsylvania reverberated in football's halls of power back east. It had been Camp's design to cultivate a generation of gentlemen based on the amateur ideal, and he led efforts to stem the tide of professionalism.
You don't want your boy hired by anyone. If he plays as a gentleman, not as a professional. A gentleman never competes for money. No matter how winding the road may be that eventually brings the sovereign into the pocket, it is the price of what should be dearer to you than anything else. Your honor. Walter Camp, the father of American football.
Ironically, it would be Camp's greatest protege, Yale's All-America guard, William Pudge Heffelfinger, who on November 12, 1892, became football's first professional.
Now, actually, they paid Heffelfinger $500, but it was a secret. You know, there were all kinds of rumors. It was even published in the paper, but you couldn't prove it. About 70 years later, old Pudge was proved to have been a pro because the ledger from the Allegheny Athletic Association showed up, and right there in, well, now it's brown and white because the ink's faded, but black and white, it says for game performance, $500, which is more than the average steel worker was making in 1892 for a year. I mean, this was a terrific salary.
Football in Heffelfinger's day was a 90-minute exercise of brute force and endurance, which bore little resemblance to the game today. The field was divided into 5-yard grids, which limited the movement of the quarterback and gave the field its nickname, Gridiron. There was no forward pass, no huddle, and no strategy. The The offense had 3 downs to make just 5 yards, and teams slogged against each other in human waves, moving the ball with mass plays like the flying wedge, a human tank designed to trample the opposition. It was probably safer in the mines.
So there was a lot of injuries there, and especially with the wedge. When the wedge came down the field and you had to meet the wedge, you were in a serious position.
The sport, college and pro, was soon in quite a predicament itself. In 1905, the Chicago Tribune reported 18 deaths and 159 serious injuries on the football field. And movements to ban football spread from high school principals to the President of the United States.
If they can't clean up the game, I will. Brutality and foul play should receive the same summary punishment given to a man who cheats at cards. President Teddy Roosevelt.
Rules were modified, and a kinder, gentler game thrived, at least at colleges like Yale. For even though the so-called postgraduate game had tried everything to emulate the college game that sired it, pro football was still a bastard son. The football establishment had disowned it, and a lack of money relegated it to back alleys and barnyards. But the players kept playing.
We gave the linemen $2. We gave the backfield 2.5. Oh, that is in relation to the newspaper being 2 cents, shave being 5 cents, a haircut being a quarter. So in comparison, everybody was satisfied with $2 and 2.5. And we didn't have the difficulties that they now have with wanting to renegotiate their contracts.
I was in Green Bay working for the Acme Packing Company. I talked my boss into backing a pro football team. I told him it would take $500 to equip a team and get it through a season. We had only a couple of substitutes and everybody played the whole game. We didn't have a fence around the field, so we couldn't charge admission, but we chiseled from the crowd, passed the hat. At the end of the season, we split the pot. We each got $16.50. Curly Lambeau, Green Bay Packers.
Even after founding a team in the rag days, you couldn't always find your team on game days.
We get to the hotel, and I'm missing all of these football players, and they find out that they have all gone into the saloon. So I go to bed, I get up in the morning and come down to the hotel to eat. There's no waitresses. They're not on duty either, and none of my ball players are in the hotel. So the manager comes up to me and he asks me, "Where are my waitresses?" And I said, "I think your waitresses are with my boys." And just as we're talking, we look out the windows, and there comes up a bunch of taxi cabs. Out of the taxi cabs comes the ball players and the waitresses, drunk as blazes. And I got a ball game at 2 o'clock. And if you ever saw a crazy game, they threw the ball all over the place. They called me under the stands, and they said they would give me $750 to get out of town.
Well, the professional football player during the rag days didn't really have a training schedule. This wasn't a profession. These players very seldom made any money out of it. Most of them, I think it was something to do this year that was a lot more fun than going out and working in a coal mine.
Most of my friends don't know what they're going to do after graduation, but I've already locked in guaranteed skill training in the Army. Qualify now and you can reserve even the Army's most sought-after technical training, up to 12 months in advance, through the Army's delayed entry program. Sure, being a soldier won't be easy, but then nothing worth having ever is.
The Tums neutralizer of the week is San Francisco 49er linebacker Charles Haley. Big number 94 shattered Philadelphia's blocking for 3 sacks and 7 tackles, helping the resurgent 49ers even their record at 4-4.
help relieve her heartburn, her antacid uses aluminum and magnesium, but his is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Tums.
If you make it, they won't eat it.
Introducing the sweeter side of Wheaties, new Wheaties Honey Gold.
If you make it, they won't eat it.
Because people are hungering for the crispy flakes of corn and whole grain wheat that make it Wheaties. Hungering for that delectable golden honey that makes it Honey Gold. New Wheaties Honey Gold, the sweeter side of Wheaties.
Is this heaven?
No, it's breakfast.
New Wheaties Honey Gold, the sweeter side of Wheaties.
Times were tough when Jim Griffin became mayor. Industry and jobs gone, a massive deficit, our city a wasteland. It took a tough man with vision. Jim Griffin promised to beautify our waterfront, rebuild our downtown, rebuild our streets, build new homes, create new neighborhoods, and restore financial stability. He kept his word because with Jim Griffin, his word is a bond.
In the shadow of the Ohio State Asylum for the Insane, the postgraduate game finally found a home. It was there on Asylum Field that the cities of Canton and Massillon played out pro football's first-grade rivalry, forcing the fledgling enterprise to grow up. It would be a troubled adolescence.
The battles between the Massillon Tigers and the Canton Bulldogs were the bones of contention, for these were the days of hostility and turmoil. The strife was so rampant that brothers, living in the different cities, spoke only to each other at funerals, and then only to extol the merits of the deceased. Dr. Harry March, pro football's first historian.
Not wanting to lose any gate admissions, we sold standing room in the end zone. To score a touchdown, any player crossing the goal line had to be in possession of the ball when he emerged from the crowd. On the game's final play, the fireworks started. Massillon raced across our goal line right into the midst of the standing room only customers for the game-winning touchdown. But suddenly, the ball popped out of the crowd.